Have you ever been frustrated visiting an online website just because you can't navigate through the navbar? Well, I've been there but not anymore, because in this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to create a responsive navbar that adapts to all screen sizes using Framer. If you are just hearing about Framer for the very first time, Framer is the platform that helps you create websites without writing a single line of code. Hi there, my name is Praise. You're welcome to my channel, and let's get started. From our last tutorial where I showed you guys on how to achieve a 3D scrolling animation with this laptop sequence using Spline and Framer. Well, if you haven't watched that tutorial, click the link to catch up. But while I was going through the feedback in the comment section, someone was asking how to create a navbar that adapts to all screens. And I was like, okay, I think I should create a tutorial concerning this aspect, because it's a very vital part when our navbar it's not linking well in other breakpoints. So if I should reduce my viewport to that of the mobile, you can see that the variation of the navbar changed from that of the desktop, which looks like this, and by reaching a breakpoint, a smaller breakpoint, which is either the mini tablet or the phone, you can see that the navbar changed. It's also responsive, because if I was to click this hamburger icon, there's also a drop down state that previews everything that you are seeing on the desktop here. So without further ado, let me show you right away on how to achieve this whole interaction. The first thing we are going to do is to start with creating a navbar that first suits a desktop. So I'll be dragging out a frame like this, and I'll be making sure the height is already 60. That is what I wanted to use. So I'll make sure that the height is 60. Let me increase this a little bit like this, and also change the color from white to black. So this will act like a frame for our navbar. To maintain a responsive navbar or anything responsive in Framer, you have to use stack. So we are going to turn this frame into a stack. You can do that in two ways, either from the properties panel on this layout, or using the shortcut Ctrl+Alt+Enter on your keyboard. But I like going to the properties panel to select a stack because it's more reachable than typing those three keys on my keyboard. So I'll turn this into a stack and make sure that the direction is set to horizontal. After turning this into a stack, we have to bring out another frame inside of it to contain all the elements we are going to be adding. So I'm going to be bringing out another frame just right inside of it, somewhere like this, and also turn this into a stack. So I will click the layout, then I'll set the width of it from fixed to fill, so it's going to fill everything else of this navbar frame. We are not going to be making use of the color, so I will just do away with that. Then I'll be renaming this on the layers panel as element holder. I'll also rename this stack, the main stack, to navbar. The next thing we are going to be doing from here is to add all the elements, our text, our button, our logo. We are going to be adding everything inside of the element holder. I think I already have one here, so I'll just Ctrl and V to paste it here. So to cut it, it's Ctrl+X, and I'll paste it inside of the element holder, hitting Ctrl+V. So this is it. It's already in the centered part. The next thing we're going to be doing is to add our text. So let me bring out one and call this resources. It's a little bit big, so I'm going to be changing the color to a lighter one. Then I'll reduce the opacity from 100% to 60%. So I have a reason for this. I will explain it later. For the size of it, I'm going to be reducing it from this 55 pixels to 16 pixels. This should be okay for us to work with. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is to create like an interaction on this our text. So whenever we hover through it, it's going to change from like an inactive state to an active state. Let me show you guys what I mean. So I'm going to first turn this into a component. So right click, create a component, and I'll rename this as text hover. I'll be adding a second interaction by clicking this, then select hover. On the hover state, I'll select the text, go to the color, and raise the opacity that was set from 60 to 100. So by previewing this, whenever our cursor comes in contact with the text, you can now see the two variation is creating. So this is why I really wanted to clear out before we commence with this. So I'm going to be copying this, Ctrl+X, cut it, and paste it inside of the element holder. We are going to duplicate this because I want to add like 3 more text. But trying to change the content of the text, double clicking on it will lead us to the component canvas. So what do we do in this state is to add a component variable on the text. Adding a variable to this text will allow us to change the content of the text. Without doing that, and we double click and we are trying to make changes and write start or sign in, let's just go with sign in here and go back to the home page, you will see everything has changed on the tree text, which is not what we want. So let me cancel this and head back. So to add a component variable on this text, I'm going to click the text, go to the content of the text and click the plus beside it and create a variable. So I'm going to go with plain text and let's just rename this as title 1. So going back to our home page, on the second text that we are trying to change, on the properties panel down this menu, you will see the new variable we added. From this menu, we can now change whatever content we want to reference on this text. So let's go in with lesson. I'll simply do the same for this other text and change the content from resources to contact us. So let's just change it to contact us. The next thing we are going to be doing is to group these three texts. So select the second and the last one and group it in another stack. So I'm going to hit Ctrl plus Alt plus Enter and change the resizing option on the width from fill to fit content because I don't want it to fill everything else of our frame. So we are good to row and we are done with this one. The next thing we are going to be adding is our button. I'll hit here on my keyboard and hit sign in. Let's just write sign in. I'm going to be adding a fill on the background of our text. So hit the fill button there, and since it's white, so the text should be black. So I'm going to change the color of our text from white to black. Of course, this button is not presentable simply because there's no padding in it. So I'm going to add breathing space to all four sides, 20 pixels to everything else. So I'm going to expand the width of it to something like this. Then also I'll round the corners to create that perfect button. Next up, I'll be pasting it inside of our element holder, then Ctrl and V. I think this is everything we need to create a responsive navbar for only the desktop. But what about the mobile breakpoint? Because that's what we are more concerned in. Because by previewing the one I did, you can see the moment when we reduce the viewport to that of the mobile, we can see the hamburger icon, and when we click the drop down state, we can see the close state. And what else can we spot? We can also see these resources that are not in the same layout as they were on the desktop. So how can we create another variant that will contain especially these two interactions, the hamburger icon and the close state? The only solution to that is to add all the elements we are going to be using to create a responsive navbar from the desktop to the mobile screen. So what do I mean? All the elements that we are going to be using in the future to create a responsive navbar for the mobile, we are going to be preparing them early and adding them to this navbar that belongs to the desktop. So let me show you how to do that. I'll first start from the interaction of the hamburger state here and the close state. So let me show you right away on how to do that. I'll hit F on my keyboard and drag out a frame like this. I'm going to change the width to 34 and the height also. I won't be making use of the color, so I'll just hide that here and rename this to menu. This is where we're going to be creating the hamburger icon. So hit another F, the frame inside of it, and create something like this. So I'll make sure that the width of it is set to 14 and the height of it is set to 2 pixels. I'll make a duplicate of this, so just drag it to somewhere around here. Next up, we're going to be selecting these two frames here and make sure everything is vertically and horizontally aligned, as you can see. So next up, we're going to be creating that interaction from the close state to the hamburger icon and from the hamburger icon to the close state. We can't do that without turning it into a component to add that interaction. But before then, I'm going to change the color because I don't want it to be blue. And let's change it to somewhere like this. Right click and create a component, and let's just put this as menu. Menu is good to go for the name of the new component we're adding. I'll add another variant to create the close state, so I'll just click the plus. Let's zoom in into this frame and see what we can do. So I'll select this and rotate it to an angle of 45 degrees. As you can see, I'm seeing the rotation of it on the canvas. But in case if you don't know how to do this, because I have to press down shift while rotating it, but in case if you don't see that, you can change it perfectly from the properties panel. Down on transform, you can see the rotation is set to 45 degrees. I will do the same for the other one and switch it to an angle of 45. Of course, this is not a close state, so I'm going to be vertically and horizontally aligning them. So to do that perfectly is Alt plus V, Alt plus H to horizontally align it. I'll do the same for the other one. Alt plus V, Alt plus H, and everything has been centralized on our frame. I'll rename this as open state, no closed, sorry. I'll rename this as closed on the layers panel and rename this our hamburger as open. To see that interaction from the closed state to the open state, let me just show you how it works. So I'm going to link this one to the other one and of course return the favor back to the hamburger state. So by previewing this, when we click it, it's going to lead to the closed state, and when we click the closed state, is going to lead to the hamburger state. But we're not going to be using any of this prototype. I just wanted to show you how it works. So I'll be removing this interaction that we added. So I'll just do that here and select the other one and cancel it from the properties menu. So that's everything on this aspect. Let's head back to the home page, and we're going to be Ctrl-Xing this to cut it and paste it inside of our element holder. So Ctrl and V. You'll notice something, that on the mobile breakpoint, the only 3 elements you can see is the logo, the button, and the hamburger state. So going back to us, how do we group these 3 elements I just mentioned together? Because we're going to be making use of them and unleashing them when it's time to create the mobile breakpoint. So what I'm going to do is to drag all these elements I mentioned to one side of our frame. So this is our menu. I'll shift it to the left hand side where the logo is. So I'll just use my arrow key. So I'll hit Ctrl plus Alt plus Enter to turn it into a stack. The next thing we're going to be doing is to change the distribution from center to start. So you can start from the left, just like how the logo is attached to the left hand side of this particular navbar. So going back to what we were doing, you can see that we have solved 2 issues now, but there's one pinky issue that we have to attend to, because if I was to preview this and reduce the viewport to that of the mobile, you can see the hamburger state is attached to the button, and on our own design the hamburger state is already attached to the far left of our frame, but on ours the hamburger state is already linked to the logo. And what we want is to group these 3 elements, the button, the hamburger state, and the logo together, so that when it's time to unleash things out, we can use them perfectly in creating the navbar for the mobile screen. So the only way I could figure this out is to make a duplicate of this button. So I'm going to create a duplicate, Ctrl D, and for the second duplicate, I'll Ctrl X it and paste it inside of this frame that we grouped. So I'm going to hit Ctrl and V. But before then, let's rename our layer so it doesn't confuse us, because I didn't really rename the first stuff that we grouped. I'm going to be renaming the first stack that we linked to logo plus menu. For the button, I'm going to swap the position using my arrow key. Let me just shift this, because what we have here is the logo on the left hand side and the hamburger state on the right hand side. So I'm just trying to replicate things. Then next up, I'll be grouping the sign on button and our hamburger state. So just group them in another stack. So Ctrl plus Alt plus Enter and set this one to fit content. Then I'm going to be renaming this as button plus menu. So we're good to go, but something is looking off. Our navbar is looking one-sided. So to centralize everything, I'm going to group this button on the right hand side in a stack. So Ctrl plus Alt plus Enter and change the distribute from center to end so it can go to the right hand side. By doing this, the text has no choice to fit in into the center of our navbar. Before we jump into adding a component on this navbar, looking at both sides, you can see we need padding on both sides of our navbar. So I'm going to take care of that. Select the navbar, go to padding, and let's add a padding of 20 on both sides. So by doing this, there's now built-in space on both sides of our navbar. Before turning this into a component, let's take care of something, because if you look at it on the other flip side, we don't want this button plus this menu on this our desktop navbar. So what we are going to be doing here is to change the visibility from yes to no. As you can see, anyone outside this tutorial who hasn't watched this video won't know that there's actually like a decoy element that we have hidden inside of this our navbar that belongs to the desktop, because we only get to unleash it when it's time to add a variant for that of the mobile. So I'm going to be selecting the navbar, right click, create a component. I will then add another variation for the mobile state. So I'm going to go by the side and click the plus and change the width of it to 390. If you are wondering why I changed it to 390, head back to the home page and we check the breakpoint size of that of the mobile, you can notice something, that the width of it is 390. So that's why I changed it to 390. But again, even after changing it to 390, it's not looking good. So let's fix things out. The first thing I'm going to be changing is the direction of the overall frame here. So I'll change it from horizontal to vertical, so we can be able to create that drop down state. So after then, I'll change the distribute from center to start. I'll also do the same for the element frame inside of it. So I'll select it, change the direction to vertical, and the distribute from center to start. Do you remember that button plus menu that we stacked together, that we changed the visibility from yes to no? I'm going to head down to the layers panel and click that stack, and let's turn the visibility from no back to yes. So you can now see the reason why we had to hide it on the desktop, because there was no better way in adding it on this second variant if we didn't add it from the first variant, which is the desktop. So don't get this mixed up, it's very easy to process. The next thing to do here is to select the logo plus menu stack and change the distribute from center to space between. This will then give a space between the logo plus menu stack and the button plus menu stack. Don't get this mixed up. Creating the drop down state, we are going to select the text, so I think this is it here, and change the distribute from horizontal to vertical, but we can't see what we are doing. So let me head back to the overall frame and change the height from fixed state to fit content, so you can fit the content of whatever thing we are doing below it, but it's not taking shape. So this is where we have to go again to the element holder and check if the height is set to fit content, which is not. So I'm going to change it from fixed to fit content. There we have our text. For this second button we didn't make use of, I'm going to, you know what to do, just change the visible from yes to no. It's just that simple. The next thing we're going to do is to select the text, head down to the resizing option and change the width of it to fill. So just change it to fill and head down to the alignment and align it to the left hand side, because that is exactly what we have on the drop down state here. But you will notice something on the one I did, the text is a little bit bolder here and there's no interaction. I had to remove it because there was no need to reference it in the drop down state of the mobile. I only needed it on the desktop view, so that whenever I'm hovering through any of them, it's going to show this hover state. So I'm going to be removing it. Head back to the main component of the text. I'll be adding another variant by clicking the plus. This is where we increase the size of the text, so let's just go ahead to change that from 16 to 20 and the color back to white. So this is on 60, I'll just raise it up to 100. I'll rename this as drop down. Let me just say drop down text. Heading to the nav bar, I'm going to select all three texts that we have here, go down to the properties and change the variant from variant 1 to drop down text. So it's a lot better now. But you can notice something, that our contact us is actually cutting off at some point. So I'm going to select it and head to the properties and change the width of it to fit content. I think that will fix it. Let's add padding below this text to give enough breathing space. I'm going to change this to 40 and I think it's okay to roll. So let's check out something again on the main one I did. So by clicking the hamburger state to show the drop down state, you can notice something, that the button is not here. Then the hamburger state, I changed it to the close state. So let's simply do the same. I'll change the visibility of this button from yes to no, and also change the hamburger state. When you go down the properties menu, you can see the two variants we first added on the hamburger state. So I'm going to switch it from open to closed. Then I'll be adding another variant for the closed state and change the height back to 60 pixels that was originally from the desktop height. So the next thing we are going to be doing here is to bring back the button, because we need it on the closed state. So I'll simply click this and locate the button, I think is inside here, and change the opacity back to yes. Then for the hamburger state, I'm going to be changing the closed state to the open state. The final thing we are going to be doing is to centralize the frame inside of it, which is the element holder. So I'm going to select the variant 3 and change the distribute from start to center. So we are done. We have created the drop down state and we have created the close state. So by previewing this, let me just do this. When we click the close state, it doesn't lead us to the hamburger state. Why? Because we have not prototyped it. So heading back to the navbar component, so I'm going to be selecting the close state and link it to the close state of the variant. Then heading to the hamburger state, I'm going to simply link this to the drop down menu. So when we preview this once again, clicking the close state is going to lead us to the close state, and clicking the hamburger state will lead us to the drop down state. So we are done with this. Let's now apply it on our main canvas. So I'll head back, Ctrl X this, and select the desktop, Ctrl and V. If you notice, you can't see it at the top simply because it's just at the bottom of it. So I'm going to use my arrow key and shift it to the top of our desktop. Then also I'll change the height from fixed to few. So everything looks good on the desktop, but if you want to change the color of the navbar to be slightly different from the black canvas that we're designing on, you can also do that. So you double click to head back to the component, and let's raise the color up a bit to somewhere like this. Okay, this is much better, but let's take a look at the mobile screen. As you can see, it's still carrying the navbar that belongs to the desktop. So to switch things that we have already created on the components canvas, head down to the properties and change it from variant 1 to variant 3. So everything is good to go. It's time for us to check what we have done so far. So let me head back to the desktop and preview it from here. Using our viewport, you can see everything is responsive. Anytime we come in contact with a smaller breakpoint, it switches to that of the mobile. Let's check the functionality if the drop down state is actually working. So by clicking the drop down state, it's not working. So what could be the problem? Because we have done everything that we could, so it should work, but I think there's a problem somewhere. Let's spot it out. This should come from the resizing option of the mobile screen. So let me select this, and you can see here the height of it is set to fixed. So the reason why it didn't drop down to the second variant, which is the drop down state, is because the height has been fixed on 60. So I'm going to change that to fit content. So whenever we click the hamburger state, it's going to drop down to the drop down state, if that makes sense. So by clicking the hamburger state, you can see everything works in real time. So this is how easy it is to create a responsive navbar that adapts to all screen. If you like this tutorial and you want to see more of this on your feed, click that subscribe button. Don't forget to like, and let me know in the comment section what you want to see next on this channel. Until next time, keep designing.